Well, well. Ladies and gentlemen, how goes today on a Saturday?
There's two big stories that the...
Oh my God. Hold on one second. I don't know how you did that, comma, but I love you and I hope it works when I do it from now on, period. You are the fucking man, period. Well, cool thing just happened. When I share the website now on Facebook Messenger, it comes up with my fucking picture. But hey, everybody, welcome to a Saturday. Secret surprise Saturday. Unfortunately, I am getting a ton of fucking messages from people that don't know that I'm live just yet. The Crypt, you're an animal. You're right. And what's even crazier, Steve, is when you realize why I'm coming on today. You don't even understand what's about to happen. You're probably not going to hang for this one. Unless you saw the description and you saw the name and you realize where I'm going with this. So, last night was awesome. And I got done last night and I started watching some more videos and looking more into just a lot of stuff about the brain, man, and the mind and how the mind works and how easy it is to manipulate the mind and what happens when you don't think for yourself. And it brought me back to something that me and Steve were talking about, which is, we're going to go ahead and take a look, which is some videos here from a gentleman. This is all in my thing here. But we're going to go ahead and take a look at something that is really excellent. Here it is. I started it not too long ago. And then I realized once I started watching it that I didn't want to watch it by myself. I wanted to come on and possibly share this experience with someone else. Because there's 5 of these videos, okay? 5. And altogether, it's probably over 6 hours. And I'm not planning on watching all 6 videos right now, by no means. If you're in here being like, watch 6 videos with me, we're going to have to do that in pieces. But we're going to watch one. I want to give you a little background on what we're about to take a look at. This man's name is John Taylor Gatto, okay? And this man is an award-winning educator. I'd be lying to you if I told you the exact names of the awards that he won. However, I do believe that the award is Educator of the Year or even potentially Educator of the Decade. I mean, this is a person where he was revered. This isn't your regular teacher, you did a great job, attaboy. This is a revered educator, okay? Known for taking children who were looking at a life of prison and looking at a life of just failure and turn these kids around and educated them, and now they're successful. That's the type of educator this is. And he got kicked out of the teachers union because he was teaching children real information. He was actually teaching children what they are supposed to be learning. And because of that, hold on here. Let me get everything set up. Josh Pilardi liked the stream. Thank you very much, you guys. For everyone coming in, this is going to be excellent. Here we go. Kevin Rottello, Josh. Let me put this on my full screen here so when we go watch the video. What do we have here? Kevin Rottello, mind control. Yes, Steve, you're an animal. Kevin Rottello, what's up? I didn't see it at first. Hey, guys, I make $5 million a week from home, and I only work 30 minutes per day. PayPal me $1,000 for more information. Don't do that. Because he wouldn't be selling you his information unless what he's actually doing to make $5,000 a day is $5 million a day is tricking 5,000 people a day into sending him $1,000 for more information, and he spends 30 minutes a day doing this, and it works every time. That'd be the only way it's possible. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about John Taylor Gatto, okay? And this person is an award-winning educator. He is a thief. He's being one. He's being facetious. But this video series that he put together, and I'm going to be honest, I'm 90% sure that I finished this video series the first time that I started watching it. At the very least, I know I got to like the 3rd video. I just don't remember if after I was like, I got through 3 of these videos, if I came back for 4 and 5. But I'm in a much different state mentally than when I discovered these videos. I mean, by miles difference. Because again, I'm growing every day as a person because I'm constantly using my muscles in my brain. I'm constantly flexing my thought muscles because I'm thinking, because I'm pushing the limits, because I'm challenging everything. I'm asking questions. That I'm a much different person now than I was when I first watched this. And I have a much better ability to, I've graduated to like a higher level course. I was taking introductory classes for a while. Then you're taking mid-level classes. I'm at like somewhat of an advanced level. And I'm going to try to watch this today. Where are the links to these videos? They are, search for John Taylor Gatto on YouTube. Not only that, search for the YouTube channel called Tragedy and Hope. Okay, now, hold on. I did this like you guys could see me, and you cannot. So let's go ahead and check it out. So, this is a YouTube page called Tragedy and Hope, where they're hosting some of these videos. And I'm going to be honest, this I highly recommend. I got lost in this. This right here, what you're seeing on top, this is called The Brain. If you go to tragedyandhope.com, you can access this thing called The Brain. All right, we'll take a look at it right now. TNH Brain, okay? And here's what it is. Okay, click here for the internet browser version of the history blueprint. Loading Brain, not Brian. So this is basically all of these things that they're going to talk about, from cybernetics, biological computer laboratories, APRNet. And it literally will help you research on all these different things. And it's like a map. The Council on Foreign Relations, Cecil John Rhodes, eugenics and population control, smart grid technology. I mean, this is an amazing tool that I really wanted to take a second to show everybody here. And look, we got a bunch of stuff here. Walter Pitts, Ryan's uncle. Warren McCullough, that's not Ryan's uncle. World Brain. Okay, I don't even know what World Brain is. Let's look. This is what the point of learning is. Then when you click on learn, oh, look at this. Herbert George Wells, more cybernetics, World Brain. You get a place to review. Okay, fantastic. Look at this. Essays, addresses by the English science fiction pioneer, social reform, H.G. Wells, World Brain. So it's a book. So that's what this is. So it's a book that they're going to reference, an objection of Freemasonry. So this is basically a giant, and you can pull it down to have a better link over here, or you can pull it up when it's research time. I highly suggest everyone check out this webpage. It is phenomenal. But more importantly than that, right now today, the Tragedy and Hope YouTube channel is absolutely, and I'm taking a look at it, absolutely unbelievable. What I'll do here, as you can see the URL is youtube.com/user/Tragedy and Hope Mag. Okay, now, I'm even going to do the, oh my God, I'm getting a call. Right when I'm sitting here, I'm going to be honest, Jamie's about to get an I'm live. And I love Jamie, but she just got an I'm live. I'm sorry, because I'm on a roll trying to tell you guys about this right now. I'm going to go ahead and make 2 stops on the road to recovery here, but at the very least, I'm going to make 1 stop. And that stop is going to be the official home for any time I go live from the bottom of the rabbithole.com, featuring everything that, oh, look at this. Show. Why am I still getting messages that aren't showing? But look at this. All right. I'm going to post this in here. Shit. I'm going to post this in here for everyone on the screen to see. That's the official. Jesus Christ. That didn't work out so well. But there it is. Oh, yeah, it did work. So you guys can see the website now. Okay. There's no doubt about it. I want you guys to have the link. This is a tremendous utility and a wealth of information. And what we're going to look at here and we're going to focus on is this history lesson from John Taylor Gatto. I'm not going to get into these end videos. I'm not, that's a bunch of extra stuff. But this part 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is really some riveting stuff. Also, too, history so it doesn't repeat series. Oh my God. I was up till last night till like 3 a.m. talking with Steve about these videos and something that I found, which was this video right here, Solutions of How to Escape the Psychology of Control, with Mark Passio, who is this gentleman down here talking about natural law. I mean, I haven't gotten to listen to too much of Mark Passio yet. I listened to that video last night of them having an interesting conversation about control and about freeing your mind. It was fascinating. It was the first time I realized, oh, this is an advanced level conversation. Like, this isn't a beginner conversation. This is an advanced level, and I need to pay attention to this right now because this is going to raise me up. So this is stuff that I know, but it's helping me understand why it is. You got to realize, when it comes to this world, we're constantly asking questions. We are asking the same 6 questions that we ask with everyone, okay? This is what you need to ask, and you all know the questions. You were taught them in school, but you weren't taught to apply them, okay? In school, you were taught, here's a textbook, 2 + 2 = 4, that's why. I told you, now do it and pass it into me. Here's your history book, here's what I told you history is, don't question it. You know, don't actually research it and apply it for yourself. Just know what we're telling you and nothing else. But when it comes to the questions you ask, the most important questions are who, what, where, when, why, and the last question, which is maybe the most important, how. Okay, the how and the why, the sandwich questions. No, they're not really. They should be the sandwich questions. They should be actually not the sandwich. They should be the last 2. They should be the crust. They're the last 2 that you go through. How should be the first, actually. I'm lying. How should be the first, because then you understand it. Okay, how it's happening. Well, now that I know how it's happening, who did it? When did this start? And when is it happening? Where am I getting it from? What is it? And what am I looking out for? And then how does it happen? I had to remember those as I was applying them because there were 6 different ones. But, or why did it happen is the last one. But the point I'm trying to make is these questions you need to ask yourself. And watching the video that we're going to watch today is a video about history. And this is a lot of the what actually happened. And which leads you to ask yourself, why aren't people learning about this? And the most important thing that I want you to all to understand when I am talking about this, and when more importantly, he is talking about this, is that Robert G. Russo is like the stream. Thank you very much, Bobby G. Feel free to share it, by the way. Anytime I get 3 shares, I'm going to go ahead and do the chant, which I know you all want to see. What's up, Juice? Ryan Issei, I love it. Joe Biden is the savior of USA. Craziness. Bobby G, what's up, Juice? So, just so you guys know, okay, we're going to do some learning today. This is the real history. And every single claim that this man says is something that happened, you will see at the bottom of the screen a source. Jay and Doja like the screen. Thank you for joining us, Jay. You're about to learn today. So, without any further ado, okay? Actually, no, I will give it further ado because we have some people here. If you guys have any questions you want to ask, go right ahead. If not, we're going to let the introduction play here. Without any further ado, for our video from Mr. John Taylor Gatto in what is the ultimate history lesson.
At boarding school near Latrobe, Pennsylvania, where, as you'll soon hear, he learned to think dialectically.
Hi, I'm John Taylor Gatto, and this is what you've been missing.
I can't vouch for what's in the coffee cup.
Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. The slogan, press on, has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race. Calvin Coolidge, 1933. Greetings and welcome. I'm your host and navigator, Richard Grove, and this is a very special interview episode of What You've Been Missing, featuring the gentle tone, scholarly insights, and wealth of wisdom that combines in the form of John Taylor Gatto, the legendary educator, author, and icon of liberty who offers a lifetime of perspectives on the origins, intentions, and destiny of the compulsory public school system. This 5-hour journey represents a landmark in American history and was filmed over 2 days on July 4th weekend, 2011, in the Constitution state of Connecticut. This is a comprehensive interview session which not only memorializes John's life's work, but also embodies a return of our birthright as human beings. Truly an event which is relevant and relative to each and every one of us. This message applies to children and adults, parents and grandparents, students and teachers, administrators and politicians, blue collar, white collar, no collar, everyone who uses words and symbols to meet their needs, everyone who depends on accurate information to thrive and survive in this world. The purpose of this interview with John is to provide each and every individual with the essential facts which pertain to our survival here on Earth, both as individuals and as a species, and yet have been censored from our public schooling. The envisioned outcome would be for each and every human being to possess the knowledge and understanding which allows them to exercise intellectual self-defense and self-liberty, thereby succeeding in pursuing and attaining happiness. It's designed to be shared and studied by individuals and groups to provide the evidence, organize the ideas, and facilitate the constructive conversations and actions necessary to address the root causes of our ever-growing incoherence as human beings. Since this interview contains over 200 footnotes and references and discusses the contents of more than 30 classic books essential to understanding life here on Earth, I would humbly recommend that your first viewing be invested into just soaking in this information and consider it for yourself. And after thinking about it, to then view it again with the intent of looking up the references to embolden your understanding and clarify the focus of your new expanded perspectives. This interview session could be screened over 5 hours, 5 months, or 5 years, as it could take that long to consume the primary and secondary source materials referred to herein. Most importantly, what you get out of the ultimate history lesson will be in direct proportion to the amount of attention and focus that you can invest into it. As each hour of the interview progresses into another, you are literally crossing thresholds of discovery. And by hour 5, the layers of these discoveries yield a truly inspiring realization. That being said, the conversation which forms the entirety of this interview is almost entirely composed of facts and references pointing toward a preponderance of evidence, which is, for the most part, unknown to the general public. And it has everything to do with the myriad of crises which face humanity, starting with our own incoherence and inability to problem solve our way forward. We're not asking you to agree with us nor to believe what we're saying. We're simply trying to provoke you into looking into these matters for yourself by providing you with an accurate map which leads to your own factual and substantial understanding of reality. For as Aristotle once wrote, it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. Through these interview sessions with John, you're going to be introduced to a variety of historical personalities and, we hope, curious to review the history which has led us to this point. And to that end, this is not about disproving or debunking what we've been taught so much as it is a journey of discovery to discern reality and to discover our birthright as human beings, so that we might go forward in order to meet the challenges we all face here on this planet together. This is truly something that corporate establishment media, public schools, and universities cannot afford to teach us. So without further ado, let us begin, as they say, at the beginning. On December 15th, 1935, John Taylor Gatto was born in western Pennsylvania in the coal mining and steel milling town of Monongahela, about 35 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. During his early school years, he spent a year at an elite Jesuit boarding school near Latrobe, Pennsylvania, where, as you'll soon hear, he learned to think dialectically and was beaten sufficiently by the nuns to create his outspoken temperament, which has endured lifelong. John did undergraduate work at Cornell University, the University of Pittsburgh, and Columbia University, and then served in the United States Army Medical Corps at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and Fort Sam Houston, Texas. Following Army service, John did graduate work at the City University of New York, Hunter College, Yeshiva University, the University of California, Cornell, and Reed College, which is a private independent liberal arts college located in Oregon. Like many famous American iconoclasts, John first honed his skills in a variety of professions before finding his talent for teaching, which proves to be his real gift to this world. After almost 30 years of teaching in New York City's inner city schools, he was named New York City Teacher of the Year in 1989, 1990, and 1991, and that same year was also named New York State Teacher of the Year. Later in 1991, he wrote a letter announcing his retirement from teaching titled, "I Quit, I Think," to the op-ed pages of the Wall Street Journal, stating that he no longer wished to, quote, hurt kids to make a living, end quote. Soon thereafter, he was the subject of a show at Carnegie Hall titled An Evening with John Taylor Gatto, which then launched a career of public speaking in the area of public school reform. He then began a worldwide public speaking and writing career and has received several awards from libertarian organizations, including the Alexis de Tocqueville Award for Excellence in the Advancement of Educational Freedom in 1997. John has been invited to speak all around the world to share his research and has spoken to audiences in Australia, Spain, France, England, Mexico, China, and Canada, as well as every one of the 50 American states. Since his public resignation in 1991, he has traveled over 3 million air miles, spoken at Harvard University, NASA Space Center, the White House, Smith College, Cato Institute, and many other places. He's also been a keynote speaker at over 30 state homeschool conventions, and he supports something called unschooling and open source education for personal learning. In his book, Weapons of Mass Instruction, here's how John defines open source education. Open source learning accepts that everything under the sun might be a possible starting point on the road to self-mastery and a good life. In open source, learning sequences are personally designed or personally signed off on, and everyone you encounter in life is a potential teacher. In open source, teaching is a function, not a profession. Everyone learns and everyone can teach themselves how to learn anything, as well as learning how to teach others. In open source, students are the active initiators. You learn that you either write your own script in life, or by default, without your input, you become an unwitting actor in someone else's script. The main thesis of John's body of work can best be illustrated, in my opinion, by asking the question, what do public schools actually teach children? And answering it with the main themes contained in John's first book, printed in 1992, titled Dumbing Us Down. He makes the following observations about how public schools are designed in form and function. Public schooling teaches confusion by breaking coherence. It presents an ensemble of information that the child needs to memorize in order to stay in school. Public schooling teaches them to accept their class affiliation. Public schooling makes them indifferent and suppresses natural curiosity. Public schooling makes them emotionally dependent on approval from authority. Public schooling also makes them intellectually dependent on experts and authorities to think on their behalf. Public schooling teaches them a kind of self-confidence that requires constant confirmation by experts and authorities, also known as provisional self-esteem. Public schooling makes it clear to them that they cannot hide, that they are always supervised, under surveillance, especially in today's society where everything online is tracked, information is sold in a variety of ways to a variety of predators. Bibliography. John's poetic prose and diligent documentation can be studied in his prodigious preponderance of publications, including Dumbing Us Down, The Hidden Curriculum of Compulsory Schooling, 1992, The Exhausted School, 1993, A Different Kind of Teacher, Solving the Crisis of American Schooling, 2000, The Underground History of American Education, 2001. And in my opinion, this is an essential book to read as it stimulates your internal dialogue and draws questions as to why are children being methodically undermined, while simultaneously providing you with the answers and comprehensive references. John also published an article called Against School, published by Harper's Magazine in 2003. And last but not least, Weapons of Mass Instruction, A School Teacher's Journey Through the Dark World of Compulsory Schooling, 2008. John's website is JohnTaylorGatto.com, and you can help him fund his current projects, sample the underground history of American education, and browse his bookstore. We've also created a special website to support your further study of this project, theultimatehistorylesson.com, which acts as a single point of access to all the media, references, notes, and source materials and bonus features associated with this interview set.
All right, so what I'll take a second to do right now is at theultimatehistorylesson.com. Let's find out. The Ulti... Well, that's not good. There is no more theultimatehistorylesson.com, which is unfortunate. It would have been nice to have a website with all of the references that are about to come up in one place for everybody to go to and take a look at, but because that doesn't exist. And for the record, just so you can see, I'm actually going to do something different today, and I'm going to take notes. I'm going to treat this as if this was a classroom lesson. And I was never good at taking notes in school, but I'm going to try to take notes today. So at the very least on things that I want to go research. I'm not going to take notes of things to, read and read over my notes and memorize my notes, because that's not the point of notes. I want to jot down notes so when I'm done watching this and I say, oh, what was that thing he talked about? I'll have it and I can go look it up after the fact. So I appreciate everybody joining me today. This is going to be a different type of stream, but again, this is the type of stream to learn. You're about to learn history that they refuse to teach you in school. This is going to be part of a series. This is a secret Saturday surprise right here. So I probably won't be on all day, but we'll definitely watch this stream. And if I have a bunch of people watching, if you guys can hang till the end and we get a crowd, then yes, I will stay on. If we get a crowd for this and we can hang all day, maybe I'll even sit here and I'll stream right through the fights tonight. So with that being said, let me go ahead and get back to the video at hand here.
Realizing that releasing this information is not enough, we've invested a great deal of effort into organizing and providing you with a research library and all the tools, methods, and resources that you'll need to learn your way forward following this interview. Possibly one of the most useful tools is our use of the personal brain software to enter, organize, and connect all of this information into a comprehensive big picture, literally helping you to connect all of the dots of useful information and formulate a useful understanding. We use the brain internally to help us organize the plethora of prolific facts, artifacts, and personalities that we've encountered while attempting to understand the nature of public education. In addition to hosting the brain models, the ultimatehistorylesson.com also hosts the video files for this interview set, as well as the audio-only versions of this interview in MP3 and CD format so that you can listen to it on the go. This site also hosts the footnotes, links, references, and PDF versions of the classic books discussed, and in the near future we'll be adding subtitles and translation into multiple languages and much more. TheUltimateHistoryLesson.com links you to our educational media producing partners, as well as the Tragedy and Hope online community, wherein you can leverage the research, methods, and tools in an international online community designed to be a fear-free zone of mutual respect, wherein individual explorations are shared to empower everyone with a comprehensive understanding. The Tragedy and Hope online community is free to those who need it and sponsored by the individuals who can afford to support our educational projects. And since this project was funded by more than 50 individuals in the Tragedy and Hope online community, I would especially like to thank those of you who gave us the ability to invite John and produce the Ultimate History Lesson so that this empowering information can be understood worldwide. We also produced the Peace Revolution podcast, a virtual classroom for adults designed to point out and provide useful perspectives, resources, and organized information. Each episode contains a subject of study essential to understanding a comprehensive view of reality, all of which is focused on providing you with the history, contextual information and references, and the various methods and tools so that you can learn for yourself that which public schools cannot afford to provide. Specifically, we've produced episodes 41 through 45 of the Peace Revolution podcast, which feature all 5 hours of this interview coupled with historical analysis and commentary, which we provide to help you really understand what's being said. These episodes amount to another 15 hours of educational content, which is also available on theultimatehistorylesson.com, providing you with the metaphorical handles, if you will, so that you can grasp this material and use it to your own advantage in everyday life. Unlike any other interview you've ever witnessed, the conclusion of the Ultimate History Lesson is actually the starting point on your own personal journey of discovery. Due to the fact that we're trying to do something that hasn't yet been done, I've edited each hour of this interview such that from the crack of the slate until the end of the tape, you're witnessing John in a natural and forthright representation of his presence, and nothing he states in the coming hours has been taken out of order, out of context, or otherwise adjusted for theatrical purposes, as I feel that it would not be to anyone's benefit to change the flow of energy as it happened. These interview sessions are designed to resurrect your curiosity, stimulate your use of reason, inspire you to look around, provoke you into asking questions, sparking your creativity and your inventiveness, igniting the solution-making process in each and every one of us. Its function is to provide you with a ramp to learning, discussion, respectful debate, and compassionate forms of communication, as well as constructive action. Here's hour one of our interview with John Taylor Gatto. It's time to begin the Ultimate History Lesson.
I just want to take 1 second to explain about this guy here. I forgot his name, but we watched a video on the show last night, which was excellent. I watched this guy break down, like, how we're being controlled with a mathematical equation. Like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Last night's show was amazing. With Steve on as my guest. If you guys missed it or you're watching this now or ever, that show is a must watch. This guy did a video from this channel called, and it's on this channel, called Intellectual Self-Defense. And it's how to use your skills that you have to defend against these things. You know what I mean? Okay, guy, get to JTG. Yeah, I feel the same way, Steve. He's just fucking rambling.
Thank you for tuning in.
I got my notebook this time,
and not
though.
dropping out.
I'm actually going to take notes. Be ready for this, guys. This is dope. Oh, don't fucking add me, you motherfucker.
Managing your projects should feel more like this. That's why you need ClickUp. With ClickUp,
You know, for pushing that button, you get a camera credit. That's pretty good. That's right. Awesome. I don't even know that we'll need the slides necessarily. I mean, We can start by talking about that.
Father, Son, Holy Ghost.
Grammar, logic, and rhetoric. So grammar is the Son, logic is the Father, the Holy Ghost is rhetoric, and God is the consciousness. And so the Christian trivium came from the Greek trivium, but they used a metaphor to encode it. Now my question to you is a metaphor a lie, or is a metaphor something else?
I think we better start a little less abstract. One of the things, a fatigued old brain. I arrive at abstraction by arguing with myself through writing. So everything I write goes through about 20 drafts. And since I handwrite it, it's quite painful to read and throw it out. But I don't really know what I say, what I'm going to say, or what I believe until I actually argue with what I think I believe. So
Here we go.
What do you think you believe about schooling?
I think I believe that the metaphor schooling clearly tells you what it's expected to deliver. We only use the expression one other way commonly, and that's with the school of fish. And they are wonderful to watch. When one fin moves, all of them move. Thousands of fins move. And they're instantly receptive to what the group wishes. I don't know who gives the original signal, but education's diametrically opposite to that. I think it starts with the assumption that we get from a fingerprint or from DNA that no two people are alike, and that the ultimate realization of yourself is to find that uniqueness where your apparent physical resemblance to everybody else sort of dissolves as an illusion, and you stand absolutely alone, or you can select when you want to be part of the larger group. It seems clear to me that the business of schooling has done what Orwell clearly saw you do, or what Walter Lippmann said you do back in the 1920s. You steal the key language of the person the group you want to overthrow, and you redefine it, and people then become confused. It's Newspeak in 1984. So the schooling transformation occurs when they see that the language of education is highly regarded, highly respected, and even in people who don't participate, there's an urge in that direction. So you simply take the concepts and you claim that that's why people are being ritualized. So there.
So you describe that individual beings, when in groups, kind of subvert their own individual thinking power. And the law of identity, none of us can change who we are. We have to be ourselves, and that is constant throughout life. So it's about figuring out how to remain individually self-reliant and self-sufficient as going through these systems that are trying to change us and to make us less self-reliant and more.
Very much so. And I think the awareness of these contrary dynamics is what gives rise to the theories of dialectic. I mean, Aristotle all the way through history, the variety of them, but they participate in the same way, is essentially asking you for your own self-defense, not to assume that what anyone says, especially as they climb the authority ladder, is the truth. Often the misinformation comes from innocent self-delusion, but just as often as you move up the power pyramid, it comes from a malign intent toward your own individuality.
So it's like a betrayal of truth that occurs, or a betrayal of belief in some authority structure that you want to believe in is true, and then little by little you realize that it's not necessarily how it might have been presented to you.
Right, even in your own individual inner life and consciousness. Before the cameras rolled, I said, the way I learn what I'm thinking is to write something down that I think I believe, and then I argue with it, and it never survives. How about that? Now, what scares me is that when I go back to it year after year, most of it doesn't survive. I mean, it takes years before I get to a core and I say, I'm not personally capable of moving beyond this thing, so that we're so well conditioned from infancy not to see the truth or relate the truth, but to shave it, that the first step in reaching for an education, I think, is to mistrust what you most are certain of, to mistrust that. Now, it may survive, but it needs tested not once, until you're exhausted from testing it.
Is the school system designed to get kids to grow into a thriving, self-responsible, self-reliant adult? Or is it to whittle away curiosity and to kind of stop them from thinking for themselves?
It's certainly not the former in any way, for the simple reason that throughout history, management doesn't know how to manage independent units, even partially independent units. Why shouldn't we ask, and any school people watching your film should begin immediately to ask politely, why are we doing this? It's a question you never hear because it's heresy. I mean, the beleaguered classroom teacher doesn't know why he or she's doing that. They're told to do it. Maybe they can give it 5% personal spin. That's why they're doing it. Does it make sense for this particular life that's asking you the question? You don't know, and if you started to care, the logic of schooling would dissolve. No one is able. You can answer the question for yourself. I used to say to my classes, and over the course of 30 years teaching, I taught kids from the Gold Coast to the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and I taught kids from the center of Harlem and Spanish Harlem. And I would say to all of them, you have a right at any time, you gotta be polite though, because I'm just human, to say, why are we doing this? And if I can't produce an answer that convinces you that I believe it, then you have a right to opt out and do something else, as long as you don't run wild and bring the whole house down. It helped me grow year after year. Not that they ask very often because they're conditioned not to do that, but enough did ask that I was put on my own mettle to say, why am I doing this? And it was a continual expansion of my own insight until politically I couldn't do it any longer. The school, oddly enough, made me so internally famous that it drew extra attention, and my system couldn't survive under the scrutiny because they would see the disparity between what I was doing and what the protocols were. So So there.
So it sounds like
I think it's just
if
us,
I'm trying to get to
Steve.
the root cause
Nope.
of why your
Someone
teaching
just joined
career
us.
ended,
Hello,
it
my
sounds
friend.
like you started asking questions, John, and it sounded like the question started with why with a question mark, and then maybe you were asking some other like the 5 W's plus how, and you were
I
actually
welcome you to the
getting
stream.
observed
This is
knowledge.
Asking myself questions, then forcing my classes to ask me questions and themselves questions. And eventually, the
Kevin, I like
productive
it. Pay
output
attention.
of my
This is good stuff.
classes was so great. Inadvertently, I didn't care how the school measured product, but it was so great that I would get visiting delegations, sometimes on a daily basis, for months, and they would leave baffled because they wouldn't see the drama unfolding that they understood as schooling, and they were right. It was less and less schooling, and eventually the pressure became impossible since I set out at the beginning of the year with an inner intention, if I had 120 kids, to have 120
I'm surprised we haven't gotten any
individually
drunk
written
jokes yet, Steve.
curricula. I never succeeded totally, but I got close enough that when the principal would drop by and only find 9 people in class and say, "Where are the rest?" that I ran out of strategies to explain where the rest were. So yeah, I couldn't operate. I couldn't function any longer because my physical strength wasn't up to it. So
How did part of the strength of your actual teaching come from releasing children from the classroom and letting them go out in the world and actually gain some useful
huge
experience?
amounts of it came from releasing anyone who had an independent course to follow, becoming that boy or girl's assistant, always with the mother's permission, because they couldn't deal with that kind of additional political pressure. So what they would learn and bring back would be like food for me. I would be like I was 120 people simultaneously. Oh, I learned much more than I learned at the 2 Ivy League colleges I attended. I used to say to my wife, and it sounds fanciful, as though, oh, he must love children, which is not true. I love people, and people can be 5 years old, but people who suck their thumb and rattle and extend childhood, school's intention is to artificially extend childhood. And there really is no practical terminus for that. If they can extend it through graduate school and postgraduate.
What is the actual reason that their childhoods are being extended? How's it serve for the
I
society?
think what we never discuss, or that the extreme left has preempted to discuss, so they marginalize themselves, is the intimate interrelationship between the economy and the way we train the young. To the extent that we once had a wildly variegated economy. I'm quoting Abraham Lincoln in 1859, famous speech of the Wisconsin Agricultural Association. Lincoln said, I call this mudsill theory because he used that term. Lincoln said the British are financing the whole Western movement, and they're attempting to reinstall their class system. And so they send their young sons over to make sure that not a whole lot of attention is paid to ordinary people or people who live in simple homes that have mud sills. He said they're not, according to the British thinking, they're not worth training or worrying about because there's no way they can possibly improve. Lincoln said, look around you. 3/4 of our population has an independent livelihood, and the quarter who doesn't works to put a little stake together to set up on their own and write their own script in life. He said, as a consequence, we don't have proletariat as they do in Britain and Germany and the European nations, and we aren't able to have a factory system where it exists in this country, which is in New England, in the textile industries. A factory will have 30 or 40 employees. They'll usually be young women waiting marriage. They'll be served tea at their machines, and there'll be opera performances staged just to keep them at the machine, because these independent livelihoods lead to, totally private, independent systems of value. So the British are wrong, but of course the Civil War changed that. We're sold that it was a great crusade against slavery by the school system.
I talked about this yesterday.
The major historians who've turned their attention to that say, to a person, that slavery was already dead. It was staggering through its last couple of generations, not because of a moral transformation on the part of plantation owners, but because the wives of the plantation owners were scratching their head and saying, the boss, my husband, vanishes for a couple of days. We have all these new slaves, and they're not black anymore. They're various shades of brown. So I'm thinking, right.
That's what it was. So if you guys joined us yesterday, I was specifically talking about that, and I forgot what the point was. And it was that the Civil War happened and slavery was already almost dead. But the wives weren't screwing the slaves. The wives were upset that the husbands were screwing the slaves. This is a smart man, and this is shit that they don't teach you in school.
No, I think Vern Parrington.
Here it is. Okay. Main currents American thought. Hold on. Steve, will you do me a favor and will you type that into the search box so I can write it down once it goes off screen?
A number of historians 50 years ago said slavery was on its last legs because the Southern womanhood wouldn't stand for it any longer.
I will buy that book today.
Russia, I believe, had freed the serfs. Britain and the continent had done this thing. We were going to do it too. But it gave a nobility to the necessity to get rid of the Southern politicians who were trained in dialectical thinking, in rhetoric, and could run circles around the Northern politicians in Congress. They could produce the most compelling arguments for this or that. And so the South had to be gotten rid of.
From my understanding, those dry goods like cotton from the South that were produced by slaves were then going to factories in the North. And the factory owners in the North figured out that the slave owners were paying too much overhead. It cost a lot to keep a whole family fed, etc. And there were letters exchanged, and they actually discovered it was cheaper. Why not make everyone a slave who doesn't know that they're a slave?
A wage slave.
Right.
And think only about the welfare idea. If you have a plantation family and you require harmony, even though some people are very subordinate, if somebody gets sick or too old to work, you can't, in fact, do the Simon Legree bit and get rid of them, or what happens is morale collapses. So you have to care for them. The discussions on the highest level among northern industrialists was, why should we have to support Deadwood here? And we could do that if they were wage slaves. Yeah. And furthermore, people like Count Tolstoy was well aware of the hardcore underneath the romantic arguments, and so were a number of other people. But the public, dependent upon media and pulpits, which were subsidized by the owners, they couldn't find a zone where they could think clearly, or someone would say, yeah, here's the truth, think about it.
Early forms of mass media propaganda from the pulpit or the newspaper.
Or the Chautauquas. Sure. Right. Oh, absolutely. The Chautauquas were put together by intense... The family that began Harper's Publishers and had the very prestigious journal of the time, Harper's Weekly.
Louis Lapham, the Lapham family?
Well, Lapham's a very latter day.
His grandfather was in charge of Harper's, though. And he was mayor of San Francisco, I believe.
Mayor, he was when the UN came in, and he told me that his boyhood was filled with foreign dignitaries in the home as house guests or throwing back a glass of wine. So you can actually trace the small number of families behind the Chautauquas, which were the most compelling mass media of the day, and you'd hear about what was going on in Boston, out in Cincinnati, and you'd want that. And selectively, ideas and ways of thinking were introduced to the best people, and they used their local prestige to make sure that, it's a natural process. So what we got was a second American Revolution between, 1865 and about 1910. This time the British won again, but they didn't win by force of arms, but by force of insight into the way opinion is created. And when the skilled workers who had intense pride and really were the key to the prosperity of early industrial operation, commercial operation, when the skilled workers understood their power, then industry and commerce were mechanized intensely, and you wiped out the need for skill. You took less quality, but now you had less contention, less argument. Carnegie was instrumental in eliminating the influence of skilled labor, and it continued right through the 20th century.
What influence have the Rockefellers had on organized labor, skilled labor, education?
The Rockefeller family can actually be traced way back in Dutch history. There's an ancestor of the Rockefellers who set up a rather detailed plan for global government hundreds and hundreds of years ago. It had just one of these flow charts that showed how you were going to do that or not. But or the great irony, of course, is that Rockefeller and Carnegie's families were fringe people in the United States, but using their brilliant insight into leverage and how it works, both were able to take nothing and pyramid it into quite a bit. Rockefeller actually, his father, I believe, but it may have been his grandfather, fled a rape charge, sort of like Strauss-Kahn's up in Bainbridge, New York. He had been charged with rape of a maid and fled. They threw Rockefeller threw their weight behind, this is emblematic of how they were, behind Horatio Alger, who also had been charged with rape up here in Connecticut, and the Newsboys Lodging House. And if you read a wonderful book that exists, a limited edition, but it's kept continuously in print, called The Rise of the Dangerous Classes in New York City by the creator of American Adoption. When I started to research school, I kept running into the same people who put the adoption institution together and the school institute, one much more important than the other, but still the same names float in and out of one another. Charles Loring Brace, who I believe his father was the publisher of the Hartford Courant. I'm almost sure in his early diaries say, I must find a way to become nationally famous. I mean, in Yale he wrote that. He didn't have any idea how he was going to do that. But finally it occurred to him that with these masses of immigrants being brought in to break the Irish labor monopoly in the mines and the mills, that the easiest way to lower the unit cost of labor was to bring the husband and the wife into the labor force. You double the size of the labor force, you cut the unit value of the labor in half. But you couldn't do that as long as they were worried about their kids. So now you have the impetus to enlarge the social work industry, to corrupt the legislatures, to give it the power to break families apart. And what do you do with the kids? Well, the expression put up for adoption tells you you don't want them anywhere in the neighborhood. You want them far away. So you put them in boxcars. This great secret monstrous event in American history that goes on for 40, 50 years. Boxcars full of the children of the labor sent west. They started upstate New York, but that was too close. So they kept going farther and farther west. And then they'd stop at a whistle stop and a platform would be brought out. The boxcar would open. The children would be put up for adoption. They had a preference for who they wanted to adopt. They wanted Lutherans to adopt because they had the Episcopal idea of hierarchy, but they were just dumb farmers. They couldn't think clearly. Here was free labor, hey, and that will end the future career of these immigrants. What's you can't put substitutes in place. Again, not called mirror neurons, that you learn to use your own biological equipment by watching people who have the same or nearly identical biological. When you matter, you're actually imitating things that your physiology can accommodate. As a consequence, you get incrementally more and more crazed inside and angry. One of the things, of course, school does is it prevents these kind of connections between different areas from occurring. That's what the short answer test is about. And Oxford and Cambridge got rid of it 100 years ago. 100 years ago, because they said people who do well on short answer tests, they memorize bits of information, but they don't connect the bits of information. And when they seem to be able to connect the bits of information, it's because they've memorized someone else's connections. On course here.
Is there any connection between frustration and aggression? And what effect does schooling have on that?
Well, you answer your own question by asking it. The connection's intimate. School removes your volition in all important ways, even who you speak to. Are not the arts of association as valuable or more valuable than anything else you learn when you're young? I read how executive hiring is done, and it almost never has to do with your training in whatever you're being hired for. Is this the I'm thinking of Apple now, I believe. Is this the person we would like to have around 3 years from now? And bend an elbow with, or play golf with, or just talk with? I mean, and that's why you're passed from set of executives, so they can sign off, yeah, he's okay, we can, but we don't tell kids that, right? It's people who have the highest grade point average and the highest SAT scores. Well, I spent an hour not so long ago, within 10 years, with the admissions officer for Harvard College, and about 30 years ago, an hour with the admissions director at Princeton. And let me tell you, their polite dismissal of grades and SAT scores was intimidating to listen to, as if you'd have to be crazy to let somebody in. Let me see if I can condense how you get into Harvard or Princeton. Of course, you get into both by donating a building, but how do other people get in? They're being analyzed on the basis of their ability to either become wealthy or famous. Either one will work. Famous, like wearing a billboard saying, I went to Princeton. There's that actress Jodie Foster, I went to Princeton. Look at where the rest of the actors and directors went. They didn't go anywhere, but Jodie did. So that's one we hear about. The Harvard lady said, we look for a record of excellence. And what does excellence consist of? It's sometime in the first 18 years of your life, figuring out how to add value to the people around you. Although she didn't say this, in a way that catches public attention. So you might walk across the United States or bicycle the perimeter of the country or row across the Atlantic Ocean. Those are physical ways. You might start a little charity or set up some weather service or some pollution monitoring around Hartford. There are a substantial number, a small fraction, but a substantial number of kids doing this as we sit here. They're writing a record of being able to add value to the community around them. And then the other fellow, the Princeton guy, said the same thing in different words. I asked him, this about 68 roughly. I asked him, what part of a resume submitted do you look at first? And the answer metaphorically caused my jaw to open. Hobbies, he said. I said, I've been taught all my life, leave that off because it's not germane. He said, on the contrary, it's the only honest information you're likely to get. How does someone spend their time when it's their free choice to spend? He said it's a window into their mind and their heart. Well, what kind of hobbies? He said, well, ideally someone would have a physical hobby, an intellectual hobby, and a social hobby, because that would show they're exploring these large, physical hobby. You mean football, baseball, Well, he said, it's better than nothing, but we would prefer not to see teams. I said, I've been told all my life that team sports identify your ability to caught on a branch and you're the headless horseman. If the horse doesn't like you, it'll roll over on top of you. And I know immediately, because that last time I rode a horse was down in Veracruz, Mexico. The horse didn't like me, took me out on the main highway with crazed Mexican drivers going 100 miles an hour in 18-wheelers, and it laid down on top of me. I was terrified because I could see these trucks coming. Didn't like that was the last time I rode. So he said, you have to actually know what you're doing. You can't say, is this an A job or a B job? If you live and are intact at it. Then he said, sailing a small boat, these little 12-footers outside of land. If you don't know what you're doing, you end up in the middle of the Atlantic, or if wind comes up, you can't see landmarks because of the waves. I said, but those things are associated with the prosperous classes. What could somebody in ordinary circumstances do? He said, well, we just let somebody in. This is probably one of the nicest factoids in my mind, in my life. We just let someone in who invented his own sport and kept records competing against himself, his past performance, his present performance. It was, get ready for this, visualize this, seatless unicycle. 10 live getting on a unicycle, let alone one without a seat, let alone riding it over broken terrain. So they let him in because they knew he was on the fast track. So we tell these lies, and of course many of the people who tell the lies believe the lies. Well, surely they're going to take valedictorians. Well, last year Harvard turned down 8 out of every 10 valedictorians who applied, and the 2 they took in, they didn't take in because they were valedictorians there. So by removing this component from the student imagination, you can control to some extent who even applies to Harvard and then who gets in. Who applies because they don't know what they're doing. What's the IT garbage in, garbage out? So what I would do was I would examine. I have a friend who started a tutoring service called the Princeton Review, and 20 years ago they were charging $300 an hour. I have no idea what they charge now. But what they did was crack the code of the questions on standardized tests. And Adam Robinson was his name. Adam took his money and left the Princeton Review to his partner. But Adam has written a book well worth, I think, your group looking up, called What Smart Students Know, Random House. What smart students know. Adam was certain that you could pass standardized tests without having any knowledge of the subject, as long as you understood the constraints, the question architects were under. For example, 2 of the 4 answers offered are always so absurd that if you know that, now you're left with a 50-50 guess. I had figured out when I was in high school that if you had some way to measure the angles on the little geometric figures on the test, that you didn't need to know. You could arrive at the answer simply by, a simplistic means. evidence that all of us know standardized tests don't measure what they claim to measure is that nobody, I mean nobody you encounter on the upper reaches of society would dream of hiring somebody on the basis of those tests or in grade point averages. You'd be playing Russian roulette because they measure nothing. The grades largely measure that you memorize what you're told to memorize. I mean, there are a few other things, but that's the heart of it. So now you know you have somebody obedient, and probably for a clerk, that is a good measure. Not for someone who has to adapt to changing circumstances, you know, by the natural selection process of reality. It's fairly easy without being a wise guy or very learned, as long as you retain the ability to think independently from the data in front of you, to penetrate the masks, the contentions that don't conform to everyday reality. So no one will hire you as a CEO and ask you what you're saying. But if you examine the data that's available about big-time politicians, now we have, and I don't think it surprised anybody, that George Bush, the most recent one, was a C average in high school, prep school, and a C average at Yale. What does surprise people is that the candidate he ran against was a C average in prep school and a C average at Yale and a lower C average than George Bush's on the Kerry of Massachusetts. The fact that the best evidence that the nation has been schooled to the point of extinction is that they were fraternity brothers at Yale in a fraternity. I'll skip its interesting reputation. It only has 15 members. And they were fraternity brothers at Yale. There's 308 million of us. I mean, mathematically, I wouldn't know how to set the odds, but they would be stupendous. No one mentioned it, or if they did, it was to quickly get over that. That should have been headlines with the New York Times and the Washington Post. Fraternity brothers at Yale run for president. You wouldn't need to mention that it was the Skull and Bones fraternity.
Definitely done my research on that. Don't need to write that
when the skew from sanity is that of that magnitude, you should not expect much to come from the watchdogs of our liberty and our best interests. How could that happen unless, but there's a Jewish expression, chutzpah, unless this feeling of contempt for ordinary people was very dramatic. I'm sure someone in the councils who allowed that to happen said, maybe someone will notice. To dismiss that shows you how powerless. To believe, for example, another example, that the recent banking crisis, you know, the real estate bubble, it is an oddity in American banking. There have been 5 such since 1961, savings and loan, technology bubble. There have been 5 of those, and the central figure in all 5 is the Citibank of New York. Now, sometimes it's called First National, that's back in 61. Then it becomes Citibank, then it merges with another huge and it becomes Citigroup. But the mentality loose on that level shows utter contempt for the safeguards built into, the founding documents, or built into tradition as ordinary people, and that includes upper middle class ordinary people, expect it to be. It doesn't exist. Now, what we've run into is a people infinitely more sophisticated than us, with a 5,000-year civilization, who are even more amoral than we are, and look at starving 3 million people to death as they did 20 years ago. Is there any shortage of people? I mean, they're already running circles. I've spoken in China 6 times for various groups, and the Chinese government is a little bit worried, not a lot, that their system of schooling, very like ours, except more disciplined, it seems to constrain the inventive imagination. The reason they're not worried is they don't recognize copyright law or patent law, so they have access to anything there. But they will not accept, they keep asking me back, they will not accept that the system they're applying to the young mind is guaranteed to foreclose the imagination that produces invention. So, I'm happy to take their money and get a chance to see Xi'an and Shanghai and Beijing, but they will follow the course we follow. It'll just take a little bit longer, that's all. Your turn.
In China, they have the outcome-based education system, but they're seeking to tweak it so that they can kind of improve it. They said that we want to keep our people under control, but we want them to be more creative and productive and efficient and happy while they're doing it, right? Now, the question is, if America has become more incoherent, wouldn't that be a function of the Prussian education system, outcome-based education, being used to control the workers and make more profits, and now it's just run its course?
It's run its course. We're exhausted now. Our schooling is exhausted, and the national vitality's been exhausted. I'm glad you used the term incoherence. About 3 or 4 years ago, the Financial Times of London, on the editorial page, accused us of being you may have read the same piece I did, an incoherent society, that we had lost a reason to be a nation at all, because subsidizing bankers and drug companies wasn't a sufficient reason to proceed in history. Yeah, we're incoherent. Nation comes from the root family, and we no longer have a concern other than a rhetorical concern with one another. I mean, obviously there are many individual exceptions.
No. What the fuck just happened?
We're so well conditioned from infancy not to see the truth or relate the truth, but to shave it, that the first step in reaching for an education, I think, is to mistrust what you most are certain of, to mistrust that. Now, it may survive, but it needs tested not once, until you're exhausted from testing it.
Is the school system designed to get kids to grow into a thriving, self-responsible, self-reliant adult? Or is it to whittle away curiosity and to kind of stop them from thinking for themselves?
It's certainly not the former in any way for the simple reason that throughout history, management doesn't know how to manage independent units, even partially independent units. Why shouldn't we ask, and any school people watching your film should begin immediately to ask politely, why are we doing it? It's a question you never hear because it's heresy. I mean, the beleaguered classroom teacher doesn't know why he or she's doing that. They're told to do it. Maybe they can give it 5% personal spin. That's why they're doing it. Does it make sense for this particular life that's asking you the question? You don't know, and if you started to care, the logic of schooling would dissolve. No one is able. You can answer the question for yourself. I used to say to my classes, and over the course of 30 years teaching, I taught kids from the Gold Coast to the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and I taught kids from the center of Harlem and Spanish Harlem. And I would say to all of them, you have a right at any time, you gotta be polite though, because I'm just human, to say, why are we doing this? And if I can't produce an answer that convinces you that I believe it, then you have a right to opt out and do something else as long as you don't run wild and bring the whole house down. It helped me grow year after year. Not that they ask very often because they're conditioned not to do that, but enough did ask that I was put on my own mettle to say, why am I doing this? And it was a continual expansion of my own insight until politically I couldn't do it any longer. The school, oddly enough, made me so internally famous that it drew extra attention, and my system couldn't survive under the scrutiny because they would see the disparity between what I was doing and what the protocols were. So there.
So it sounds like if I'm trying to get to the root cause of why your teaching career ended, it sounds like you started asking questions, John. And it sounded like the question started with why, with a question mark, and then maybe you were asking some other, like, the 5 W's plus how, and you were actually getting observed knowledge.
Asking myself questions, then forcing my classes to ask me questions and themselves questions. And eventually, the productive output of my classes was so great, inadvertently, I didn't care how the school measured product, but it was so great that I would get visiting delegations, sometimes on a daily basis, for months, and they would leave baffled because they wouldn't see the drama unfolding that they understood as schooling, and they were right. It was less and less schooling, and eventually the pressure became impossible since I set out at the beginning of the year with an inner intention, if I had 120 kids, to have 120 individually written curricula. I never succeeded totally, but I got close enough that when the principal would drop by and only find 9 people in class and say, where are the rest, that I ran out of strategies to explain where the rest were. So I couldn't operate. I couldn't function any longer because my physical strength wasn't up to it. So
how did part of the strength of your actual teaching come from releasing children from the classroom and letting them go out in the world and actually gain some useful
huge
experience?
amounts of it came from releasing anyone who had an independent course to follow, becoming that boy or girl's assistant, always with the mother's permission, because they couldn't deal with that kind of additional political pressure. So what they would learn and bring back would be like food for me. I would be like I was 120 people simultaneously. Oh, I learned much more than I learned at the 2 Ivy League colleges I attended. I used to say to my wife, and it sounds fanciful, as though, oh, he must love children, which is not true. I love people, and people can be 5 years old, but people who suck their thumb and rattle and extend childhood, school's intention is to artificially extend childhood, and there really is no practical terminus for that. If they can extend it through graduate school and postgraduate.
What is the actual reason that their childhoods are being extended? How's it serve for the society?
I think what we never discuss, or that the extreme left has preempted to discuss, so they marginalize themselves, is the intimate interrelationship between the economy and the way we train the young. To the extent that we once had a wildly variegated economy. I'm quoting Abraham Lincoln in 1859, famous speech of the Wisconsin Agricultural Association. Lincoln said, I call this mudsill theory because he used that term. Lincoln said the British are financing the whole Western movement, and they're attempting to reinstall their class system. And so they send their young sons over to make sure that not a whole lot of attention is paid to ordinary people or people who live in simple homes that have mud sills. He said they're not, according to the British thinking, they're not worth training or worrying about because there's no way they can possibly improve. Lincoln said, look around you. 3/4 of our population has an I've spoken in China half a dozen times for various. About 3 or 4 years ago, the Financial Times of London, on the editorial page, accused us of being an incoherent, you may have read the same piece I did, an incoherent in this crisis. You really can't understand why our schools are the product.
That happened because my fucking dog was struggling to get out of here because he wanted to get out of here so bad, and he fucking hit the computer. I have no idea how that happened, but I'm so mad I didn't notice it till now.
Of the Rockefeller family, the Carnegie family, the Astor family, the Vanderbilt family, the great capitalist families. They understood that the real problem in successful capitalism is assembling capital, getting people to give you their savings on the promise that you'll give them more back. But if you have people in an inventive matrix who can look at the way the expensive businesses doing things open up across the street and either do it cheaper or better or simply open up somewhere else where no one is doing it, capital is always at great risk. So oddly enough, I don't want to claim credit for what really is a brilliant insight, but I want to crave credit. It was openly discussed, let me say, from 1880 to 1900. We were being forcibly converted from an economy of small farmers, small engineers, entrepreneurs, into a corporate economy. And these men doing it, they weren't intellectual dumbcoffs. They could see that as long as the American inventiveness was loose like a wild beast, they were going to have a lot of trouble pulling. Someone would say, but I saw, Jack, and he went belly up. So Prussian schooling, which had, for a different reason, had been out to destroy the imagination. And let me say to anyone listening to this, when someone makes a reckless statement like that, you make sure they can document it. And I will document it as long as you're willing to walk to your local public library. Because in every public library worth its salt in the United States, and in every college library, you will find a collection of essays by a Prussian philosopher, Johann Fichte, who was the immediate heir to the University of Berlin's philosophy department, which had been under Immanuel Kant. Fichte wrote a series of, it was over a dozen public essays to the Prussian king from, let me say 1808 to about 1818. They're called Addresses to the German Nation. And the provocative event that set the first one off was the Prussian army, which was the Prussian economy, renting soldiers, stealing other people's stuff, had been whipped by Napoleon's amateur army at the Battle of Jena in 1806. And Fichte said it was because this demon imagination was loose among ordinary soldiers, and in situations they would override the orders from headquarters about what to do, and that's why we lost. Now, what should fascinate anyone listening is that's exactly what the so-called liberal philosopher Spinoza in Holland had said in 1690 in a book called Tractatus Politico Religico-Politicus. Tractatus Religico-Politicus. Spinoza said that the ordinary population was so psychologically diseased, murderously so, there was no way to heal it. Just as Fichte, 125 years later, said there was no way to heal the disobedience gene in people who thought for themselves. Fichte said we have to set up a system of forced schooling, universal forced schooling, in which we destroy the imagination. Bells, ordered lessons, constant testing, rankings. Now, if it were only those two major figures, but you now can go back a few hundred years in history to John Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion, which is this thick, tiny print. But if you ever go mad and actually force yourself to read it, rather than to read what an encyclopedia tells you it says, you'll find that Calvin says that the saved are saved before they're born. The damned, who are 19 to 1, are damned before they're born, and no amount of good work or behavior can save the damned, and no amount of evil behavior can damn the saved. The expression that used to be pretty common, but has vanished, I think on purpose, is justified sinners. The saved are justified sinners who can do anything. They can carpet bomb civilian populations whether they're Nazis or Americans. You know, you've done no harm, according to Calvin. Calvin said the only way the elect, he called the saved, the elect will ever be safe because they're outnumbered so heavily, is to set up a system of universal compulsion schooling with the intention of destroying the imagination and filling the head with garbage. Spinoza said the same thing. Fichte said the same thing.
I think we just ran out of tape. Is that what happened? Is that one still running?
Yes,
but it has no micro. Yeah. All right. So we're going to take a 10-minute break.
Oh, good.
We're going to change the tapes. We're going to turn all these lights out. We're going to turn the AC back on and cool you off. If you want to get up and move around, use the bathroom.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was edition 1. I don't know how many people watched it. I know I'm fucking pissed that the fucking thing accidentally rewound and we probably watched extra shit for like 5 minutes and might have missed a minute or two. Believe it or not, I'm enraged about it. Part of me wants to even go and watch the video again without my fucking dogs annoying me and go live and delete this one forever because I'm that upset about it. But it is what it is. We're here. That was extremely interesting. I took a bunch of notes of a bunch of stuff that I can research. I also ordered 3 books last night. I ordered Tragedy and Hope. I ordered Propaganda. And then I ordered the Anglo-American something, also by Carol Quigley. I don't remember. But it was the frequently ordered with trio. And it came recommended. And I was told it is an easier read and a good introduction before Tragedy and Hope. Just getting to the good stuff. I know, Steve, you're absolutely right. I'm contemplating, do I go to episode 2? I'm contemplating it right now. I'm not sure. Part of me is like, man, I would love to go to episode 2. Do you guys want to see some episode 2? Just so you know, episode 2 is available for everyone to view on their own on the internet under the Ultimate History Lesson. And I'm seeing now that these are played. Oh, shit. This is where I saw them when I originally found them. This is what you're looking at. The Ultimate History Lesson with John Taylor Gatto. Maybe I'll throw it on and see what he's getting to. A 10-minute break, they probably had a good chance to refresh himself. Listen, it's tough. It's a guy talking. And it's a teacher who talked for his whole
boarding
life.
School near Latrobe,
and
Pennsylvania.
He talks slow, and he has a problem with his jaw. So I get it that it's tough. And, you know, I put this on for, I don't want to say inspiration to watch, but I looked at it like, why would I spend the next hour and 15 minutes of my life watching this alone when I could possibly inspire even one more person to watch it with me right now while I'm watching it? And that's why I decided to stream it. So for you guys that watched, I appreciate it. I'm going to put on 2. If I make it all the way through, then you know how it do. Oh, no.
Major mind.
We're doing all the wrong things. Hold on.
Major minds with a lot of influence who...
Can I have you hold that thought?
Oh, sure.
This is the good stuff, though.
See, this is what happens when you got real talent. It just goes. 4 cameras rolling. Red dots, everybody? Cool. Floor is yours.
So we have this ominous continuity among major minds with a lot of influence, including transatlantic influence on the states. We have, prior to the break, Fichte in Prussia, Spinoza in Holland, and Calvin really beginning in Geneva and spreading all over where his theology spread. But the father of this, at least in the form of written documentation that's easily available, has to be Plato, the Greek aristocrat who speaks through the mouth of Socrates and writes two influential utopias, one well-known, the Republic, and one not so well-known, the Laws, which is the product of his mature reflection on what needs to be done. And all four of these men, and we could, if we had time, do 40, but these four major names spanning European history agree that the ordinary population is A, very dangerous to the social order if it learns how to think and if its imagination remains intact. And furthermore, we have this corollary that there is no way to improve this. And what I've left out is the killer app that occurs in the middle to the end of the 19th century from one of the wealthiest families on planet Earth, the family of Charles Darwin, and their former Anglican minister-trained son, Charles, who in his second major publication, The Descent of Man, says that the evolutionarily retarded are fatally dangerous to the physical integrity of the human race, the advance of civilization, because of the few evolutionarily advanced, like the Scandinavian blondes and the English blondes, crossbreed, God forbid, with the Irish or the Spanish, evolution will march backwards into the swirling mists of the dawnless past, and nothing can change that. Maybe a few million years might change it. Certainly nothing that current generations can do. Darwin, of course, is in every school, including every elementary school in the United States, probably the world, and no one bothers to mention that he doesn't say the human race is evolving. There's a few, a fraction are evolving. Now put yourself, if you're watching this, in the position of a responsible person who learns that. As someone who's made worldly success, has a little bit of time on their hands and resources, and now you know that if these ordinary people walking around in the American democracy, if they happen to crossbreed with your daughter, evolution is going to march backwards. You now have a justification beginning in 1871, second to none. You can argue with Calvin, you can argue with Spinoza, you can argue with Plato, you can argue with Fichte. This is science and mathematics. And furthermore, an unknown connection that has for some reason escaped the attention of the Darwinians. Darwin's earlier cousin, Thomas Malthus, has said there is no way mathematically to feed the poor, because if you feed them, they'll reproduce more successfully, and then there'll be twice as many, then 4 times as many. That population expands geometrically, but food only arithmetically. So and of course in Darwin's diaries, he said that his pursuit of the secrets of biology are stimulated by the work of his cousin Malthus. Now we have after Darwin's two blockbusters, the second of which...
I'm going to raise my hand from now on. Yeah. What's the full name of Darwin's Origin of Species?
The progress of the favored races, and he does not use the term race the way we do. He recognized about 57 separate races, of which the Irish are on the very bottom. Thank goodness he said that, because a respectable percentage of every audience I speak to, that you'd otherwise be reluctant to say these things to, is derived from, anybody here derived from a partial Irish background. You know, he said the Irish are hopeless. There is no hope for the Irish. Of course, what's left out of simply relating.
Now, I played this extra today. I'm going to end up wrapping this up now, and I'll tell you why. I played a little extra because I'm pissed that I fucked up that last video. And I didn't want to leave it there. I wanted to inspire you when I get off to go ahead and watch this and enjoy it for yourself and embrace thinking. Embrace imagination. Embrace possibility. Flex your brain. You know, I keep quoting something that I heard someone say, and it was so profound. They were like, what is truth? And he goes, truth is that of which has happened. And then he's like, when you look at the future is contested of a bunch of different possibilities, possible futures. And even the present is consistent of multiple possible futures that are actively ceasing to exist every second that goes by, and the truth has happened. The truth represents everything that has actually happened in reality in the past. So the truth is reality. That's what I like to call reality, okay? But obviously they refer to two different realities. But one of the things he said, he goes, there is, and he didn't say it like I'm saying it. I'm taking what he's saying and making it mean a little bit different. But truth must be discovered to be truth. Otherwise, it's just belief. And what I mean by that is, whether you learned it in school, whether you learned it on the news, whether you're listening to me tell you about something that has or has not happened, what I like to talk about is how to think, okay? People like Ralph Bruno, God bless his soul. He's trying so hard. He really is. He is fucking, you know, on his cause. He is fighting for what he believes in. But unfortunately, he thinks I do the show and I preach politics and whatnot, and that this is some sort of I'm right, you're wrong, when all I ever preach is to think for yourself and to ask questions. Most of what happened yesterday was historical, as far as the history of propaganda in our world, people who have created it, how it's been used in other civilizations over the course of time, you know, and our civilization over the course of time, and how it's changed our civilization. These are things that have happened. No one disputes these things. This is history. This is reality. I have the book, Propaganda, by Bernays. I can't think of his first name, but it's Propaganda. But he's Sigmund Freud's nephew, which is important also. But we learned about a lot of historical things yesterday, and this all has to do with how to think and how to process information. I don't come on here preaching ever that I'm right or wrong on anything. And I don't expect you, if I do tell you I believe something, I don't expect you to take what I say at face value. Do your own research. Try to prove me wrong. Try to prove me right. Do both. See what happens. See where you find success. See what happens if you find me wrong, and then if you find me right, and if one contradicts the other, and one makes the other one impossible. You know? Edward Bernays. That's what it is. Edward Bernays. I'm going to say it as Edward Bernays. Edward is the name, though. And he wrote the book Propaganda. It's coming to my house. It's going to be here tomorrow. I'm so damn excited. That's the first one I'm reading. And it's just, again, you know, I can't stress enough. And I'm even getting off here to give myself a break because I want to fuck around with my Nintendo Switch for a few hours. I might come back on tonight. I might end up watching the fights and not coming back on because there's going to be fights, and that is an excellent way of resting my brain because there's nothing that I like more as a human being than watching two people punch each other in the face, and not just any two people, but two people who are two of the best people in the world at punching and kicking each other in the face. It is phenomenal. Grappling, the chess match that goes into it is truly something to behold, something that I love, and I'll probably be watching that later on. But what I want to stress now is, again, ask questions. I'm realizing that these people who are extremely focused on the mental control aspect of society and the differences between those who are controlled and those who are not controlled is very different. And I enjoy it. I enjoy what these people are talking about because all the shit I've been talking to you about up until yesterday was shit in my own brain. My own thoughts, my own things that I was processing. I didn't get a lot of these things I was saying from anybody else. It just comes from years of thinking this way. How I'm always saying think, question everything. Cognitive independence. They used a word yesterday that I loved called intellectually bankrupt, which is what people who are brainwashed are. There is nothing to stand behind their nonsense because it can be broken down. There is no intellect there. It's intellectually bankrupt. I have a spoiler alert. When I bring Ralph on this channel, I'm going to ask him why a lot. I'm going to ask him how a lot, and then I'm going to follow it up with why. Why do you believe this? How did you come to this conclusion? What research did you do that gave you this opinion? Who do you think may have contributed to giving you this opinion? When did you discover the truth? Because the truth can only happen from discovery, like we just said. It can't happen from belief. Because if you don't look it up for yourself and you don't discover it, then all you're doing is choosing to believe someone. And whether that person's on the news, whether that person's the author of a book, whether that person is me, whether that person is Steve, whether that person is your wife or your husband, your mother or father, your teacher or your boss, any information that you accept without questioning it is not truth, it's belief. Because you are taking someone else's word and you are believing in it. Which I think goes to a lot of the reason of why so many people fight so hard to defend propaganda, because it becomes a belief, and subconsciously it is a belief. And I'm sorry, consciously they're not aware that it's a belief, but subconsciously they're treating it the same way they treat a belief, because they'll argue defending propaganda the same way most people defend religion, which is why they were saying that this stuff is religion to a lot of people, you know? And it's just astounding to me. It's astounding how people are studying humanity, studying people, analyzing the masses, not just the individual person, but analyzing the group think as well. And seeing how this changes over time and seeing where we are now and imagining being like, Jesus Christ, imagining where this is going to go. You know, like me and Steve were talking about yesterday, his exact words were, you ain't seen nothing yet. If you think 2020 was bad, you ain't seen nothing yet. And you know what? I think that stands to be very true. Unless we can do something about it. And all you can really do, and that's what I'm getting from all these people, and all you can really do is truly unplug yourself from this. Exercise your ability to think every day. You can't change everyone's mind every day, but you can change your own mind on everything constantly. It's that simple. Just think about shit. And they keep talking about using your 5 senses. Sight, smell, taste, touch, and speak? I don't know. Is that the 5th sense? It is. Yeah, it is. Hear, yeah. I believe that's the 5th. Correct me if you guys are watching. If that's not the 5th sense, let me know. But taste, touch, smell, see. No. Taste, touch, smell, see, hear. That's what it is. It's taste. Taste, touch, smell, see, hear. Those are your 5 senses. I don't know why I thought speak was one of the senses. But use your 5 senses to see reality. You know, I had Ralph Bruno. I use him as the poster boy because he's been in the chat. There may be a time when I decide to bring him on and put him in the big box here. And I told him I'd only do it if he reads the book on propaganda, and we'll come on to discuss propaganda. And we'll keep our conversation simply about propaganda, and then we'll see where it goes. But he said to me on Facebook, referencing me, isn't it crazy? You know, it's so about 9/11. It's so terrible what happened to all those people. And I think it's so terrible that we have to convince someone like Brian Gregg that this even happened. And I go, Ralph, you don't need anything more than your own eyes and your ears and your mind to know that Building 7, which did not get hit by a plane, mind you, fell down into its own footprint. Allegedly, the story they're telling you is from some office fires caused by debris from the other planes. Okay? Fell into its own footprint. You don't need to convince me that it fell from fires in the corner. But you do need to be brainwashed to ignore the reality of what you can see and what you can learn from looking into it that day, seeing videos of people on the ground, back up, we're going to pull it. And even again, just what you see, common sense. And you need to be brainwashed to ignore your own common sense. And that's the difference between me. So I will regretfully, I'm not even going to say I will, because then he's going to find out I said this and hold it against me. But maybe one day I will invite him to come on the show if he actually reads Bernays' propaganda book. I'm getting it tomorrow, and I'm hopefully going to beat him in reading it. Then when I'm done reading that, I'm going to finish None Dare Call It Conspiracy. I'm putting that on pause right now. I may jump into it today also after I get off here. And then I'm hopefully going to jump into Tragedy and Hope. Oh, man. I'm not looking forward to it, though. But I'm going to try, man. I'm going to try. Like I said last night, if I can get through Tragedy and Hope, I have no excuse for the rest of my life on why I can't read a book. There's no excuse. It's too big. I should be able to read the fucking Bible if I can read Tragedy and Hope. So I just want to add that here. Just keep thinking for yourselves. We had a bunch of viewers come in. I'm glad a couple of you guys stuck with us the entire time. Stuck with me. Stuck together. Stuck with John Taylor Gatto. It's a short read. I like that. Use 6. Intuition. Yes, Steve, you're correct. I'm seeing this now because I wasn't looking at the chat here. Intuition, as far as that goes. You are absolutely right on that front. Intuition is basically your common sense. Well, if it looks like a duck and it smells like a duck, it might be a duck. You know, you have to use all your other 5 senses, and then judgment, intuition. How does it make you feel? Do you feel like it fell down like that with a bunch of explosions from office fires? Or do you feel like it might have been a controlled demolition? You have to ask yourself this. And it being a short read propaganda, it looked that way when you held it up, which is why I'm going for that one first, to spike my confidence in blowing through these books. Because hopefully I can bang that out in one session, which would be great. One hardcore day of just focusing every second of my free time on pounding through that book. So, with that being said, everyone, I advise you to do whatever it is that you were wanting to do. If there's a book that you want to order and you want to read and you were thinking about it, go do it. If there's a video you want to watch, go watch it. If you hear me talk about brainwashing people and you want to watch about civilizations and populations being brainwashed, by people like Edward Bernays and other people, elites, with propaganda and other such tactics, ideological subversion. You go research those words. We just watched a video with a bunch of other things to research. If you want to learn, go do it. If you want to be distracted, don't tell me I'm brainwashed.